Thank you, Valerie, for your sponsorship and generosity. Thanks, Adi, for managing tech. And thanks to all of you for showing up today. I first want to begin by acknowledging that I forgot and overlooked yesterday the importance of mentioning that it was George Floyd's yahrzeit. And I just want to dedicate today's practice to his memory. May it inspire us to acts of compassion and justice, motivated by love. And I also want to say, as I have the last 2 days, that each one of us is a unique expression of the divine, a unique image of God. And however you're showing up here today, in body, heart, mind, spirit, you are welcome just as you are, as a beautiful, sacred being. So, when we started on Monday, we began to explore the possibility that Torah is not just out there in our sacred canon, but that actually it's in us as awareness. And then yesterday, through practice, we explored the ways in which that Torah might be less audible than the words of Torah, of instruction, of guidance that come through our tradition, because sometimes it speaks softly and maybe even through the sound of silence, which is a literal translation of that phrase from 1 Kings that we looked at yesterday, called mamadaka. Literally means a subtle sound of silence. And so if we're caught in the objects of awareness and not able to observe them, and if the mind is churned up, and if we're moving about all the time and filling our lives with static and noise, we may very well overlook that Torah. But the good news is that we can get still and quiet and discover at the core of our being a part of us that is inherently still and quiet, and that knows our experience from the most gross level to the subtlest level. So what we've been doing is really preparing the ground by turning inward to recognize that awareness is our inner teacher, our inner Moses. It is that part of us that is innately lucid, still, and knowing. It is the wisdom mind, the source of our inner Torah. And now we're ready to become more receptive to that Torah by dropping a question into that pool or expanse of awareness. So I just want to tell you a quick story. This one goes back a number of years, but this continues to be a regular practice for me. Back when I was shortly out of rabbinical school and I was dating, I remember that I felt really drawn to this person. And I really had this profound yearning to want to be with her. But there were certain warning signs that suggested that maybe this was not the right relationship, and that ultimately it wouldn't nourish either one of us. And so there was a lot of push-pull and a lot of confusion, and I really didn't know what to do. And I remember I was sitting in my Upper West Side studio apartment one morning, meditating, and I got really still and quiet inside. And I turned to the divine and I said, I want this so badly, but more than I want this, I want you to tell me what I should do. I'm opening myself up to your wisdom. Please help. And then I just sat in silence without trying to make anything happen, just really attuning myself and tuning into my inner life for any signals that might convey any kind of clarity or wisdom. And what I got was, and this welled up from my kishkas in the same way that we explored that text about Abraham learning Torah from his kishkas that were overflowing with wisdom, right? Something just welled up from the kind of deepest part of my innermost being and came into conscious awareness. And what it was the word no. The word no arose in my mind. And I knew with absolute certainty that that was the truth. And that if I were to go against that, I would inflict tremendous pain and suffering on myself and on this other person and distort that innermost truth. And in so doing, distort myself and my soul. But it took me 6 months to reconcile myself to that answer. And there was a lot of resistance, and I pushed against it. And that was a very painful time. Luckily, over the years, I've become much more adept at and much more faithful around trusting that wisdom. So today we're going to explore what it might be like once we get quiet and we tune in to the inner life, really leaning on this awareness as the source of our wisdom. What might it be like to actually ask for help and listen deeply and see what may arise? And I leave it to you to decide who it is or what it is that you're asking for assistance from. Could be God, the beloved, your higher self, the universe. There's no dogma here. Check out what's true for you in your own experience and really honor it. But as we move in this direction, I want to ask Adi to pull up the source sheet. We're just going to take a look at a couple of helpful signposts along the way here. So soon we'll be reciting Psalm 27 for a full month in preparation for Rosh Hashanah when we arrive at the month of Elul. So I'm just providing a little bit of a glimmer of what's to come. But for years, I really leaned on this beautiful line that King David utters. Earlier in the Psalm, he says, "Achat sha'alti me'et Adonai ota avakesh." I actually want one thing and one thing only. It's the only thing I seek in life. Shivti beveit Adonai kol yemei chayai, to sit or dwell in the house of the Lord all of the days of my life. Lachazot benoam Adonai ulevaker behechalo, to behold the delight, the pleasantness, the beauty of God, and to visit God's sanctuary. And then he turns to the divine at the end of the psalm and says, Horeni Adonai darkecha unecheni be'orach mishor. Show me your way, ever-present one, and lead me on a level path. We may yearn for something so badly in our lives, but we may have no clarity about how to proceed in that direction. And the Malbim, who was a famous commentator from the 1800s, he was actually the chief rabbi of Bucharest at some point. He comments on this verse and he says that the verse actually means to convey two separate requests. The first is, show me your way. King David asked for the skillful means needed to attain transcendent knowledge and true understanding, right? He wanted to know, God, what are the practices that will help me dispel my confusion and attain higher wisdom? Says the Malbim, for there are two obstacles on the spiritual path. The first is that we don't know the way, which is why King David stated, show me your way. We may not have any sense at all for which direction to proceed in. What's the way forward? But the second pertains to the many twists and stumbling blocks we encounter along the way, which is why he said, lead me on a level path. Let's say we know where we're going. We know where we want to be headed. Maybe I want to be more compassionate. I want to be more wise. I want to feel more connected to a loving, transcendent presence in my life. Whatever the case may be, right? But there's all of these twists and turns and stumbling blocks along the way, says the Malbim. So David said also, lead me on a level path. And what are these stumbling blocks and twists and turns? They include the hindrances that arise on account of our desires and the time and effort we invest in seeking our livelihood, right? So our desires can confuse us. They can block our inherent wisdom. And, right, we're all busy. Not that that's a bad thing, right? We're all trying to stay afloat and keep our lives going and earn our daily bread. And so we may not actually be able to make time for practice to actually take time to look inside and ask for clarity and seek clarity. So it's really a tremendous, profound blessing that we're here together, dedicating time to practice. So just consider for a moment, right? Do you know where you want to be headed? How you want to use this one precious human life that you've been given, such that when you come to the end of your days, you can say, I used my life well. And secondly, if you know where you're headed, is it always so clear how to get there? Do you ever encounter roadblocks, confusion, conflicting desires, or distraction, or fatigue, right? These can all be folded, these kinds of questions and challenges on the spiritual life can all be folded into our practice. So Adi, if I can ask you to scroll down just a little bit more to Diana Winston. Diana Winston is a well-known Buddhist teacher, and she provides some instructions on how to enlist the wisdom mind. And she suggests that traditional Buddhist mindfulness approaches are pretty strict. Mindfulness is not intended to explore our psychological material. Right? We just watch it come and go. We just watch it come and go. We know thought as thought, we watch it come and go. We know feelings as feelings, and we watch their impermanent nature. So we must avoid analyzing the content of our thoughts and emotions at all costs. However, my experience is that in practice, it is much more nuanced than that, and the same is true in Hasidic practice. Because remember, according to the Hasidic tradition, the divine wisdom mind is flowing into our being, and everything that's happening in our lives is here to awaken us to God's presence here and now. So we actually need to pay close attention to our sensations and our emotions and our thoughts, and not just watch them come and go. Certainly watching them come and go can be helpful for cultivating some non-attachment, for not being so swept up into the stream. But if that's all we do, we may miss the transmission, we may miss the message. So she goes on to say, when our mind is concentrated, stable, and aware, a well-placed question can help us find some ease and understanding. For example, with strong repetitive emotions like shame or self-judgment, we might ask ourselves, what might be the wisdom within this judgment? Adi, if you wouldn't mind scrolling down, please. Can I separate out the wisdom from the reactivity? Or is there a deeper need that I am trying to fulfill? That's one I use a lot in my practice. When I'm confused or feeling some afflictive state of mind or emotion, I'll say to the afflictive state, is there something you want me to know? Or is there a deeper need that is calling out for attention here that's going unmet? Right? Can I meet this need in other ways? And this is key here. Questioning in this way is very different from ruminating or analyzing or trying to figure something out. This is something I really want to stress here, okay? This is not the activity of the everyday mind, right? Trying to figure things out and solve problems. It's also different from psychotherapy. Instead, it's making space for our wisdom to emerge by dropping a question into our mind. It's like dropping a pebble into a pond, and we look for the reverberations. And Adi, if I can ask you to scroll down one more time to Eric Schiffman. So Schiffman, in a beautiful article in his book, Yoga, The Spirit and Practice of Moving into Stillness, he talks about a metaphor that can kind of help illuminate for us what it's like to receive wisdom from the transcendent wisdom mind. You know, imagine you're stuck in traffic, right? And you just really don't know which way to go because you can't see too far ahead, right? You don't know how far the traffic extends. You don't know, what's going to happen if you turn off. Is there going to be traffic there? And so on and so forth. But imagine that, you could get in a helicopter and be kind of transported to a higher view, right? Where you could see the terrain and you could see how long the traffic extends and what roads are open and what roads are closed and so on and so forth, right? And then transport yourself back into here and now behind the driver's wheel. Right? So if you could get the message from that higher perspective, it would be incredibly helpful because it's a broader perspective that knows more about the twists and turns and what's coming down the pike and the general terrain of the path, right? So this is what we do when we drop a question into the wisdom mind. We are the driver behind the seat. We may be confused, lost. And what we do is we call upon this more expansive view, this higher intelligence that can then siphon and make its way down through the channel of our own consciousness and provide us with answers, concrete answers about real things that we grapple with, not just transcendent things, but real things. Like, who should I be dating? Should I end this marriage? Should I go for that new job? What should I have for breakfast today? I'm scared because of this virus. How can I work with that fear? And Schiffman offers us a question here that helps us turn toward that transcendent quality of wisdom, toward the transcendent divine mind, and say, I want to know what you would have me do. What would you have me do? And if it's a particular situation, you say, I want to know what you would have me do in this situation. What would you have me do? So I want to offer that, and you can stop the screen share. And I want to offer that for our practice today. Right? First, we'll take a couple of moments to get still and quiet and turn inward and touch in with our wisdom mind, this awareness that is always there in the backdrop, even as the objects that it knows move and change and oscillate and arise and pass away. And then from there, I'm going to invite you to drop a question. And it could be the one that I just offered, and you can write it down for yourself if you want to. Right? I want to know what you would have me do in this situation. What would you have me do? Or it could be a question you come up with yourself. It doesn't have to be this question from Schiffman. Right? And then you just wait and sit and watch and listen. And the message could come in many different forms. It may come through a physical sensation. It may come through a deep quality of intuition in your gut. It may come through an emotional turn. It may come through a thought, but one that is truer and comes from a deeper place than the activity of the everyday mind. Right? It may come in language. It may come as a song. It may come as a gesture. Right? The key here is to know and allow and let be. Right? We observe, we know, and we allow whatever it is to move through us and be known and accepted. How we're going to adapt our lives to that truth may take some time to figure out. What we're going for here is this intuitive wisdom, this deep truth, and putting ourselves in a receptive mode so we might hear it. So let's settle in. And again, it's very easy, or easier, I should say, to begin to connect with the wisdom mind. We're here and now in the present moment. And also, if we can notice that it's there in the backdrop against some object that's moving. So I want to invite you to inhale deeply and exhale and let go of any tension or tightness in the body. And then track sensations in your body here and now. And that could be the arising and falling of your breath. But if that doesn't feel like a safe home base for you, if it elicits unpleasant feelings, a sense of constriction, you can attend instead to sounds as they come and go, or sensations in your extremities, your fingers, your toes, or even the sensations that accompany contact between your body and its support. There's no best here. Any anchor will do the trick as long as it feels like a safe home base for you that allows you to relax your nervous system and arrive here and now. And you can also let your eyes be open if closing them feels particularly triggering for you. If painful or difficult memories arise when you close your eyes, you can keep your eyes open. And just follow the movement of sensation here and now. Notice this movement, this flux, and also how in the backdrop there is this awareness. That reveals the truth of your experience here and now. These two things are happening simultaneously. There is movement and there is stillness. Of course, if a thought arises and intrudes upon your focus, that too can be known as an object arising and passing away against the backdrop of awareness. Just notice, thought is here, thought is changing, thought is passing away, and awareness is there in the backdrop, knowing that thought is arising, staying, and passing away. And then when you're ready, turn toward this awareness and present it with a question. One that's alive for you, an area of confusion, an area where you may want more clarity, a broader perspective. Could be a spiritual question like, I want to know how to evolve more fully as a human being toward greater God consciousness. How can I do that? Or I want to feel your love, oh God. How can I do that? or it could be something more mundane. It doesn't matter. And then once you pose the question, and sometimes this is the hardest part, you sit, you wait, and you pay attention in silence, quietly, noticing what's happening in the body, noticing what's happening in the heart, noticing what's happening in the mind, meeting whatever arises with kind curiosity, with love, with a sense of balanced acceptance. Of course, it's always okay to ask the question a second time or to ask a follow-up question. Mary Oliver poem called Praying. It doesn't have to be the blue iris. It could be weeds in a vacant lot or a few small stones. Just pay attention, then patch a few words together and don't try to make them elaborate. This isn't a contest, but the doorway into thanks and a silence in which another voice may speak.
Thank you, Sam. Friends, we seal our practice as we always do with the Mourner's Kaddish. It gives us an opportunity as a group to extend our love and support to those of us who are in mourning, observing a yard site, who are carrying grief of any kind. Invite those of you who are reciting Kaddish, if you wish, to share the name or names of those you're holding in your heart today, and to join in rising in body or in spirit to recite the words of Kaddish. Gadal, Kadash, Mekada, Yama, Dibra, Kute, Yamlich, Malchute, Bechaye Ve'om, Kaye, Dechol Beit Yisrael, Agala, Karim, Amen. Shmei
Rabba
Barach,
Leolam Leom Maya.
Yitzhak v'Yishmael Yitada v'Yisrael Shemei Lamimchol Birchata v'Shirata Kata v'Nefesh Ran Ba'ala Ru Amen. Yehi Shlama Rabba Minu Shemaya Chaim Aleinu v'Yaakov V'Einu Amen. Shalom Mirama Shalom Aleinu Kol Yisrael Kol Yoshei Teda
Amen.
Amen.
Friends, thanks for joining us. You're welcome to stay on for a few minutes of Q&A with Rabbi Sam Feinsmith. If you have a question, you can put it in the chat box. We have a limited time, obviously. So if you have a question that you would like Sam to try to address, also you can, Sam, maybe you can put your, if you don't mind putting your email address again in the chat box. People can email questions if we don't get to something. Thanks so much to Valerie Taylor. Thanks Adi Stein for holding our space here with skill and grace. And for those who are leaving us, we hope to see you tomorrow, day 4 of this wonderful series, Standing or Sitting at Sinai. Many blessings for the rest of the day. We hope to see you tomorrow and or Friday. So there was a question that did come in, Sam, from Alana. And I kind of felt like my sense was that you kind of answered the question in that beautiful teaching today. But if I understood her question right, maybe you understood it a little bit differently. It sounded like the question really had to do with when we are growing in awareness of this point of awareness within us, which may help us have a sense or intuit that something seems right or wrong, a direction to go. Her question was, is the awareness meant to be more, as she puts it, more neutral, more detached, and only observant? I'm taking that as, or is it meant to, be directive and to inform an action? So that's how I understood it. And I thought the teaching today and your beautiful teaching about focusing on the question, not the answer, describes this process, this practice, as cultivating receptivity, as opposed to, as he said, therapy or analysis or ruminating. which is more kind of grasping and like trying to extract an answer as opposed to trying to be open to receiving a direction. I don't know if that's the nuanced distinction that Alana's question is getting at, but why don't you take it?
Yeah, thanks, Mark. I mean, awareness in our tradition is called da'at, which means knowledge, consciousness, awareness, right? And the first usage of that word, and we should just know this as a general principle. If you want to know something about what a spiritual word in our tradition means, go to the first place in the Torah where it's mentioned. And the first mention of that word is in Genesis chapter 2, verse 6, I believe. No, that's incorrect. I apologize. It's Genesis chapter 3, verse 1. Where it says, Adam yada et Chava ishto. Adam knew his wife Eve. Right? So what that suggests is that this kind of awareness is actually quite intimate, right? And allows for what may seem like opposites to come into a loving kind of union and embrace. So on the one hand, as we've seen, this awareness can kind of step back, right, and kind of view the panorama without being so caught up into all of the movement of the body-mind. And in that regard, it can also kind of help us to see a broader perspective that's less caught up in our desires, our fears, our ignorance, and the kind of ego identity and all of its projections and confusions. But perhaps paradoxically, at least if you think about it intellectually, but not at the experiential level, right? This awareness also infuses the experience of the body-mind, right? It's very intimate with it. It has this penetrative quality, right? That allows it to actually become bonded to and to illuminate from within, not only from above, our experience of the body, heart, and mind, right? And it's specifically in so doing that we can access that wisdom of awareness itself through the gateways of our everyday experience, because it both transcends but also infuses our everyday experience, right? And as hopefully you've seen over the last couple of days, when I'm breathing, this embodied sensation, right, of breathing, that's not separate from awareness. There's awareness in the breathing and also beyond the breathing or behind the breathing, right? When I'm having a thought, like I'm confused, I don't know what to do, the awareness is in that thought in addition to transcending that thought. Right? So I invite you to find any object of experience that you ever experience where awareness is not present both behind, as it were, in the backdrop, but also within that actual experience, which makes for a kind of intimacy and a kind of intimate knowing that can give rise to wisdom, not only beyond our experience of being a discrete body-mind, but within that very experience. That's my response.
Well, there are a lot of good questions, which I think we'll just have to suggest that you review. I think maybe this is something that we can do within the time that I'm hoping is capture some of the essence of the question, which is the role of I, of the, when we ask that question, we're speaking in a dualistic way, right? What is it that you want of me, And how do we know when the answer we're getting is not, the answer we're getting is not just what we want to hear, right? But we dissolve the I enough that we can hear something that may feel more true, clearer, not distorted by the ego. How do we know that that's Torah versus our opinion? To go back to there's a question about your great story about trying to discern about this relationship, which may be that could be a good example for this, right? Like your eye, the way you described it, your eye, letter I, wanted something very badly.
Yeah, that's a really important question. We're gonna tackle that in greater detail on Friday, but what I'll say right now is that if you're always getting the answer you want to hear,
Mm-hmm.
that ain't it.
Well, I just keep shaking the magic 8 ball until
right.
It's different than that.
Every once in a while, you'll get an answer that feels like what you want to hear, but a lot of times you get answers that are actually completely opposite to what the ego wants.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
And is that when you have a better sense you can trust that?
Not only that,
mm-hmm.
Right? It's also that the ego is so bound up with our everyday mind, right? That says I, me, mine, that's telling a story or a commentary about our experience, right? But what happens when something wells up from a deeper place, right? A non-egoic place, a place of primordial knowing. And that's one of the reasons why this awareness is important, because, we identify so much with the body as who I am, right? I am this body, or I am this mind, right? This thinking mind, right? And if we investigate those elements of our experience, we see there's no object in the body that's permanent. It doesn't exist. So that can't really be who I really am. I mean, yeah, I have a body, right? But A, it's not an object, right? It's always moving. And B, it's not really who I really am. And then you can look at all of the objects of the mind, right? Emotions, thoughts, volitions, images, perceptions. You can investigate those, watch them, see if they're permanent or impermanent. My experience, they're all impermanent, right? So I can't be that either, right? Well, if the whole ego mind is essentially comprised of the body and the thinking mind, right? If that's my whole personality, including my memories, right? My conditioning, all of those things,
all of which are
edges of
impermanent.
my body, all of which are impermanent, then who am I? Who am I really?
Mm-hmm.
What I've been trying to convey through these simple practices is that no matter what the objects that I behold are, right, in body and in mind, and no matter whether or not those objects stay or change, and they all change, right, what remains there always in the backdrop is awareness. So it turns out that I am loving awareness. That's who I am, right? And when an intuition or an insight flows out of awareness, it qualitatively feels different from the kind of question that I tried to figure out using my everyday ego mind, right, to get to a solution. It actually feels like it blows your heart open, right? There's a sense of certainty. There's a sense of faith and trust that arise spontaneously when that knowledge arises. There's a sense of being at peace with yourself. That's my experience anyway. You'll have to check it out for yourself. And I realize we're over time, but we'll talk about this more on Friday when we explore rather the relationship between our inherited Torah and our inner Torah, right? Because I think we need both. And we'll be talking about that on Friday some more, and we'll come back to this specific question.
Thank you, Sam. More will be revealed, as it always is. Thank you so much. Thanks everyone for joining us for this really wonderful, rich series this week. And we hope we'll see you tomorrow at the usual time, Friday as well. Thanks, Sam. Thanks, Valerie. Thanks, Adi. And be well, everyone, for the rest of the day. See you tomorrow.